Hi there, welcome to Nonsense Whisky. My name's VinPF, and on today's episode we're going to be going back to some rye. Now, if you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I struggle a little bit with rye. Not a huge fan of the kind of really high rye spice, that kind of flavour, and I've been looking for a dram that will kind of ease me into that. I did find a couple on my journey. A notable favourite of mine now is probably the Jim Beam rye of all the ryes that I've tried. It's nice and light and easy to drink. So when I heard about this one here, this is designed to be a little bit lighter in character, I thought it's best to get it on the channel. Now, these guys haven't been around for very long, Sagamore Spirits. They've got a distillery now in Maryland. It's from 2017, but as you can work out with the dates on that, that's not quite right for a 4 to 5 year old whiskey, which this is. So this is actually sourced from MGP in Indiana. Now, thankfully, that information kind of is on the label here, distilled in Indiana. So if you know your stuff, then you know that that's MGP. But if you didn't know, now you do. It's important to know these things, but they are making their own liquid. And hopefully, you know, looking at the ages of that, we should be seeing something maybe next year, the year after, 2021, 2022, which will hopefully be of a similar character to this. Now, something I do know, if we're talking about MGP, obviously this is a huge distilling operation. And if that sort of thing puts you off, it probably shouldn't, because a whole heap of American whiskies and bourbons are made from Indiana and sold without any information about it, the MGP on the label at all, let alone saying distilled in Indiana. So it's definitely an important thing to be aware of. In this situation, they've put their own inflection on it. I know that they've got the kind of investment power behind them to be able to go to MGP and tell them what they wanted, rather than just sort of picking stock, which, you know, you or I might be able to do. If we had some money to ourselves, we might be able to go to MGP and say, I want that barrel that's been sat there for a while. You wouldn't be able to knock on their front door and say, I want you to distill this, and this, and do all this for me. Sagamore Spirits have kind of crafted this in their own way, hopefully in the aim of making it similar to what they're actually going to be creating at the distillery itself. So my point being there, in a kind of roundabout way, just because it's a source whiskey doesn't mean it's a bad whiskey. MGP make some exceptional whiskies. A lot of brands that you know and love are MGP made. So it's out there. Let's just move on and check out the liquid itself and see what we've got. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's a 4 to 5 year old whiskey. This is a blend of high rye whiskey and low rye whiskey. So I don't know the exact mash bills, but checking out the MGP website, it's probably going to be something like a 51% rye with a 45% corn mash bill, malted barley 4%, along with a really high rye, which could be anything up to sort of 95% rye. It's unlikely to be full rye. Malted barley really does help that sort of thing. So I don't know the proportions of those two either, to be fair. So ideally, this is going to be something that's a little bit lighter to drink for someone like me who's not really a huge rye fan. In the UK, this is 50 quid, so this is pushing the upper shelf for me for affordability, but it's definitely in there. It's a 41.5% ABV whiskey as well. So, you know, there's going to be some rye fans out there that are looking for higher ABVs for sure, but let's get into the actual glass and see what we've got, shall we? So, on the nose then. Now, it's quite clearly a rye right from the off. It's got that kind of rye pepperiness to it, some cinnamon. For me, some this dark fruits like cherries and that sort of thing. Quite oaky as well. It's a really nice nose, actually, I have to say. Really nice nose. Let's try on the palate. Well, yeah, so this is one of those flavour palettes that sort of exponentially crescendos out. So it starts out quite light, as you might expect. It's a relatively low ABV, so it's not as viscous as it might be, but it's got a light oaky flavour to start with, and then as it builds up, some more pepperiness comes into it, some more spices, those kind of rye spices I was talking about on the nose. Finally, the kind of sweetness comes through, and this kind of cherries and dark fruits come out the back end. But out of all of the ryes that I've tried, this one's one of the easiest to sip, I have to say. As I said right at the top, not usually a big fan of ryes. I've been finding them a bit of a struggle, and it turns out that I like either end of the spectrum. The ones that I've really liked are, like as I said earlier, Jim Beam Rye. I can now add this to the list because this is nice and light and easy to drink. but I also like the kind of really high ABV end of that. Like I tried a Nichols and Perk Whistle Pig fairly recently, maybe last year sometime, and that was incredibly enjoyable. But sort of everything in between, I find either too fiery or a little bit too much on the rye. So for me, this is a bit of a winner. One more sip. Yeah, I'm going to greatly enjoy that. It'll be one that I can sort of happily put in cocktails as well, I have to say. Now, let's talk a little bit about the price. Obviously, I said earlier, 50 quid. It's probably a bit cheaper in America. These things tend to be. Obviously, we're paying for a lot of the kind of export taxes and things like that. People need to make money in that chain as well, so there's always going to be a little bit more. In the UK, we tend to see this is kind of a normal price. You know, there are cheaper bourbons for sure, cheaper ryes for sure, but kind of American whiskies, bourbons, good ones, tend to be a little bit more expensive in the UK. And also we have to remember that although this is a sourced whiskey, we are funding a startup business essentially. So they're going to be charging a little bit more off the bat for a relatively young whiskey. But, you know, look at one of my personal favourites, the Cotswolds. They're charging sort of £45 minimum up to 65, 75, 85, that sort of prices for all their special releases. So, you know, 50 quid is a lot of money for sure, but it really isn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. For sure, you can get cheaper whiskies out there, but, you know, do you want to give your money to mass-produced stuff, or do you want to give your money to mass-produced for sure, but also start-up business, hopefully going to be producing their own stuff fairly soon, releasing it at least, and the prices will probably come down when they start making their own things and they've got less people in the chain. That's the hope. So kind of gloss over the MGP thing for now and maybe look at the brand itself. They've got another couple of whiskies out there as well. They've got like a barrel-aged version and a double oak one. So if I can, I'll look into getting those at some point as well. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up. Definitely something worth checking out, I think, especially if you're like me and you're not really a huge fan of rye. This could be your kind of like bridging rye whiskey that gets you into it. Like I often talk about kind of peated whiskies. Not everybody can drink a peated whiskey right off the bat, and you've got to go and find those bridging whiskies that get you into it. I'm kind of the same with rye. I've been struggling a lot with rye, and this is one of those ones that will help me ease into it, I think.